Chapter 10. Sister. It was the afternoon of a gray autumn day in the late 70s. The school day had just finished, and I was so excited. Mom and my new baby sister would be waiting at home, and I would get to see her. I was 6 years old. My hair was cut short, but it wasn't quite as short as the year before in kindergarten. I don't know where brother was, but I ran all the way from the school to the crossing guard, which was a decent ways down the road from school. By the time I got to the crosswalk, Dad was there in his car. Mom was worried that I would be too excited to look both ways to cross the road, he explained, so she had sent him to come pick me up. I came in the house, and Mom told me to go into the teeny tiny bedroom to see the baby, but shh, be quiet, because the baby is sleeping. I tiptoed into the room. I don't know if the sun had literally come out by that time, or if in my mind it is just the most beautiful, sunshiny memory. The room was dim and quiet, with soft sunlight diffusing through the blind over the window, giving it a warm glow. There, sleeping on her stomach, in her little sleeper pajamas, in the crib, was a new, magical little person. Sweetest little sleeping face turned toward me. Tiny hands curled into little baby fists. I put my little hands over my mouth and gasped as quietly as possible with pure, euphoric joy. It was absolute magic. Newborn babies are, though, magic. And even though I undeniably, unwittingly felt it then, I would consciously realize it many, many years later. Maybe that day was the calmest my baby sister was, because as time went on, she did not want to sleep very much. Mom reached a point of desperation in trying to get sister to sleep, and probably to get some kind of a break. So, there was a very small attempt of trying to let baby sister cry in the crib without immediately rushing in to pick her up. I remember that kid wailing away in there for what seemed like ages to my young mind, and because I didn't understand just how wiped out a mom can get, it seemed a little traumatic. Mom tried to reassure brother and me that sister was okay, and this wasn't going to hurt her because it was just crying. Brother and I just wide-eyed each other in silence over that. I also think Mom was trying to convince herself as she tried out the popular science of the time. In the end, not too long after, Mom came back into the kitchen with a red-eyed, hitching chest baby sister. That's the one and only time Mom tried out the let the baby cry method. She admitted in later years that trying to ignore the crying baby was awful. She couldn't do it. Mom always super loved babies after all. There's an old photo of me sitting on the couch holding baby sister on my lap. Sister is a few months old and she's big time smiling at someone off camera, probably Mom, as Dad takes the photo. The longer I look at that photograph, the funnier it becomes. Baby sister looks slightly homely and just kind of nuts. All bald-looking with these crazy eyes and huge, open-mouthed, toothless, pink gums grin. We dubbed that the Uncle Fester photo, as in baby sister looked like Uncle Fester, all kind of blonde, bald, and wild-eyed. If you don't know who Uncle Fester is from the original TV series, well, you'll just have to look it up. Once she grew some hair, she was extremely cute. I had dark blonde to light brown hair after my sun highlight and locks got chopped off for kindergarten. Brother was quite blonde as a little kid, but it slowly darkened to a similar color to mine. Sister, however, was blonde. Platinum blonde. Brother and I inherited the thicker, kinkier hair of Dad's side of the family. Sister's hair was straight and smooth and white blonde. As a toddler, she was very energetic and went through a phase of wanting to climb everything, which nearly broke Mom. She also seemed to be a very anxious little soul, almost immediately. As she got older and more aware, the only person that she wanted to hold her was Mom. She didn't even really want Dad to pick her up. She just wanted Mom all the time. One time Mom and Dad had to go out somewhere for a couple of hours in the afternoon. Grandma came over to babysit. Baby sister cried the entire time. Grandma didn't enjoy that very much. She was quite flustered by the whole thing. She tried to jolly her out of it, bounce her up and down in her arms. I tried to distract her and shake her toddler toys in front of her, make silly faces. It felt very stressful. When Mom finally returned, she picked up Sister, and Sister promptly bit Mom hard on the shoulder. The message was pretty clear. Baby sister was pissed that the only person she felt safe with had dared to leave her, even for just a little while. Sister didn't seem to enjoy letting Mom have any peaceful moments. She'd wail and wail from her playpen set up right next to where we'd be eating dinner until Mom picked her back up. She got her first pair of proper, sturdy, hard-soled baby shoes and started walking. The shoes came off and she wasn't able to walk. Shoes went back on and she happily clopped up and down the kitchen floor. She was a little pain in the ass, but she was very cute. Mom crooned and fawned over her during the day and called her Susie all the time, which wasn't Sister's actual name. Susie, 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 she would sing, but then one day decided that she'd better stop calling her that before it stuck, since the kid had already been named. At almost 3 years of age or so, when little people should be talking, Sister was still doing her crazy gibberish talk. The Christmas tree was set up in the good living room and it was time for decorating. Sister, decked out in my favorite t-shirt, was having a great time selecting ornaments and meticulously placing them on the tree. She'd put an ornament on, stand back, and while gesturing with her hands, tell us all about what she had done, and all without a single word that made sense. Another red ornament beside the first. That favorite t-shirt deserves a mention, by the way. It was yellow, had a sparkly decal printed message on the front saying, "It's hard to be humble when you're as great as I am," with shooting stars around the letters, as though it was a great explosive statement of my awesomeness, and on the back, my name in black velvet block letters. Absolutely wicked, that shirt. Apparently it was so rad, as we said way back then, even toddler Sister couldn't deny its appeal. She kept fishing it out of my dresser and putting it on. This was a bit of foreshadowing for the cute tops she'd sneak out of my dresser to wear out to the clubs when she got older. When Sister was 3, Mom and Dad must have realized that the kid should have been talking, so they'd taken her off to do some tests and found that Sister, though not completely deaf, was very deaf indeed. I don't know how aware I was that Mom felt crushed and horrible for this. She felt it was her fault because she had been unwittingly still taking birth control pills in the very early stage of pregnancy and didn't know they hadn't worked. Sister was a surprise. I overheard that conversation one day when Mom and Dad had some company over downstairs and were chatting about it in the good living room. Even though she thought she was done having kids and horrified to find out she was pregnant and didn't know how they would manage, in the end, Mom was so glad for that little surprise. This was one hell of an interesting conversation to have overheard as a kid. I shared this with Brother and he was just as blown away with this intel. So 2 things seemed to happen on the same day when Sister was 3 and I was 9. She and I got the big bedroom upstairs and would thenceforth commence 17 years of being roommates, and on that same day she got her first set of hearing aids. I can picture her. She was wearing this fancy pink dress. I guess Mom had dressed her up for the fitting appointment. Her new bed was on the left side of the room as you came in, pushed against the wall. Sister was standing on the bed and pressing herself into the corner of the room. She had puffy eyes from crying, a deep frown on her little face, and she was quiet. Like, quiet. She was freaked. That chatty little sister who had loads of crazy gibberish to say all the time was tight-lipped and silent. She had suddenly been thrust into a horrifying world of sounds flooding into her previously quiet ears, and it was clearly overwhelming. I don't remember how quickly Sister adjusted to her hearing aids or when she started to feel okay with actually hearing the world around her. We had a device in the house that Mom kept in the top drawer of a slightly dilapidated old baby dresser that also doubled for a short period of time as baby Sister's change table. The device had an earpiece and could be connected to Sister's hearing aids. I guess this was so a parent could test the sound levels and make sure everything was working. I tried it out one time and was appalled at the sound quality. So tinny and artificial and electronic. It was like listening to the world through a bad radio. That made an impression on my young self, and I felt so sad for my sister that was how she was going to hear the world. I feel like when she was little, Sister had 2 moods, hyper and sullen. She'd be kind of blah and we'd jolly her into a good mood, and then she'd become really happy and she'd be all nuts, leaping on us and wanting to wrestle and be a general little kid total maniac. But it would be too much and then we'd get annoyed with her and the poor kid would go back to being sullen. She was the classic baby of the family, and my parents were very protective of her and very indulgent. I have a fuzzy memory of Mom being near the end of her pregnancy, and me doing the typical kid thing and expressing my fear of not being of any importance anymore. Mom said, "You'll always be my baby." But I don't think that's how it actually went. Sister was absolutely the baby of the family and was definitely coddled the most out of all of us. This was probably because she was the youngest, of course, and probably because she was a very clingy, very anxious little kid, and of course it was because of her hearing loss. She was the pickiest eater out of all of us, and was the only one allowed to sit in the TV room and watch TV while she ate, or didn't really eat, her dinner. Listen, dinner was a big thing in our house. Dinner was important. This wasn't like me, where I'm whipping up some stir fry or curry or what have you an hour or two before we eat. No, dinner was serious. When Mom went grocery shopping, she planned what she'd be making for the whole week. We didn't get takeout very often. The greater majority of those meals involved a good deal of planning in advance and effort, and a lot of them were long-cooked dinners, like the thin, breaded fried pork chops that would be baked in the oven for several hours until they were tender and almost shellacked on one side in shiny, oiled deliciousness, or the best pot of spaghetti and meatball sauce that I've never been able to completely replicate, or amazing soups, delicious chili, fabulous roast meals with whipped mashed potatoes that Mom would make a little well in so it could be filled with gravy. As Sister got older, she wasn't a picky eater anymore, but she definitely was as a kid. Sure, we'd all have a couple of meals we personally didn't love, and maybe the odd food item here and there. I hated the way potatoes tasted cooked alongside a pork roast. Brother hated green beans from a can. His least favorite dinner was one of my favorites: cotletti, canned green beans, and rice-a-roni. That whole dinner to me was gold. Cotletti are basically Polish baked hamburgers. Mom would bake them in the oven until they were just delicious. Anyway, yes, these were the more old-fashioned, from-scratch type meals with lots of 1970s, 1980s, crappy convenience products mixed in. But Brother hated that whole meal. I wasn't too fussed on the Polish crepes we would have that everyone else in the family loved. They were filled with a ricotta cheese-type filling and topped with maple syrup and sour cream. I think I'd like them now just fine, but growing up, meh, not so much. Also, as a very little kid, I did not like the way certain little skinny fast food French fries would taste. There would be certain fries in the mix when we'd have takeout that would be kind of dry and mealy, and young Karen hated those and decided that those fries had potatoes in them. I remember sitting at the kitchen table, and after encountering a couple of those yucky fries, I was becoming suspicious about the whole lot. So I asked Mom, "Do these fries have potatoes in them?" Mom, "No." Me, "Phew, okay, back to enjoying my little burger and potato-free fries." So like anyone, we all had the odd thing we didn't like. But Sister seemed to not like dinner much at all, and she also didn't seem to have the patience for sitting and eating, unless she was plunked in front of the TV. And even then, we learned much later that she was sneaking out through the patio door to dump her dinner out off the far side of the deck. Brother was not impressed that only little Sister got to eat in front of the TV, and Mom didn't really have a good answer why, but she'd get annoyed with the question anyway. Back in the days of VCRs and VCR tapes, you'd make sure to record a good movie when it came on TV, but you were also thrifty, and you'd just keep using and reusing the same tapes to record things over and over again. So you'd have a lot of tapes that were like a patchwork quilt with leftover, overlap bits and pieces of movies and TV shows. On one or two of those tapes were a couple of segments of movies that Sister loved and I eventually loathed. One was a portion of the movie The Never-Ending Story, and another was the Marshmallow Man scene from Ghostbusters. She always watched those while eating her dinner. I hated the Marshmallow Man scene so bad. Oh my God, I was sick of that scene, and she watched it over and over and over and over again. This enjoying things to death business is giving me shades of Brother. He was a good one for overkill himself. He killed certain songs for me forever. Anyway, Sister was obsessed with The Never-Ending Story. She would be singing the theme song over and over again, absently as she played with her toys. She would be singing the song as she bounced on the couch, but just that one line over and over again. The never-ending story. Ah, never-ending story. Ah. She loved bouncing on the couch. She'd sit there for ages, watching TV or singing to herself, and literally bounce back against the cushions like it was a bouncy rocking chair. Her straight platinum hair would go into staticky kinks, knots, and snarls where her head connected with the cushion. Often she'd be walking around with this blonde rat's nest on the back of her head from bouncing. One time, Sister had a bout of stomach flu when she was little that was so bad it sent her into the hospital for a couple of days. She had thrown up so much she was becoming dehydrated but couldn't keep any liquids down. I'm sure Mom was in a total dither over that. Sister was a pasty little kid anyway, but when she returned from the hospital, she seemed as white as a little ghost. And for some reason, to me, her head looked huge. She must have lost some weight, but I didn't put that part together back then. Come to think of it, Brother also did a small stint in the hospital after an intense stomach bug barforama. I remember walking across the parking lot of the hospital with Mom and Brother as he carried a bag with him for more vomiting, and me crying and wailing very woefully and theatrically, "My poor brother!" Sister also had her wrist pop out of joint one time after she was having fun with teen Brother, who was holding her hands and spinning her around him. As she was airborne, her wrist popped out. Another noteworthy time of sisterly silence as she sat on the couch with wide, horrified eyes, protectively holding her wrist. Off we went to a doctor. I can picture that doctor moving her hand around this way and that, and Sister wincing and protesting this examination. I was a pretty reserved kid, but I was watching in sympathetic agony. "I think that's hurting her," I said. The doctor looked at me plainly, said nothing, and twisted Sister's hand a certain way. Sister yelped in pain, and voila, her wrist popped back into place. Neither Sister nor I were too pleased with this method, but I guess it worked. My siblings didn't really get along the greatest. Brother is 11 years older than Sister, and that was a big enough age gap to cause something of a rift. By the time Sister was heading off to high school, Brother was in his 20s and disapproving of Sister's teenage rebelliousness, because Sister was definitely the most overtly rebellious of the three of us. Sister, having started to enjoy hair rock bands in her tweens, was immediately drawn to the popularly unpopular group of kids we used to know as freakers. Freaks, freakers, skids, metalheads, as they were nicknamed. These were the kids who were the polar opposites of the preps. These were the kids who you'd find in the smoking section, and they had a mystique of being bad. And that's who Sister loved. We had a controlling mother to begin with, but Sister was really overprotected, and no doubt her every move was questioned. So those rebellious kids must have seemed like glorious freedom. Thing was, it wasn't like the preppies were exactly angels. They just dressed like they were more presentable. There were plenty of disreputable things going on in that group, and I heard enough stories of stuff that happened before and after the high school dances. So yeah, not particularly fair that this group of the school's disenfranchised were viewed as the bad kids. But what do I know? Most teens have strong needs to fight the system, no matter what group they find themselves in. Anyway, things really took off when teen Sister started dating a guy who was a senior in high school, a freaker, a guy who had very long hair, a guy who hung out in the smoking section. My parents were horrified. Mom asked Sister, "If I told you you had to stop seeing him, would you?" And Sister, unmovable stone, told her no. Sister and her man are still together too, so you never know. One time Sister skipped class to hang out with her bad boyfriend, who was actually very nice, and her friends, and the school called home to say she wasn't in class. Dad actually showed up at the little coffee shop they were hanging out in, which was right beside the school, from work in his fireman's uniform, and ordered her to come home with him. And he was not pleased, and Dad didn't get angry too often. That was an extremely mortifying moment for Sister. Sister and I always got along well, though, even as we shared that bedroom for years. Yes, I'd bug her sometimes. When she was a kid, I'd tell her all the time how our room was divided. I'd say that her part of the room basically included her bed and shelf, but my half included the window and even her dresser. This was all just me being a pain in the ass, and she hated it. It was so stupid too, because how could it make any sense that her dresser was part of my section? She could have easily contested that, especially since my room was clearly the little alcove section on the right side, the little cut-in section with the slanted ceiling over my bed, the self-contained little section that had my dresser and shelf. But I could be a dick every once in a while, and Sister was pretty gullible. I think the only times we got into any kind of serious fight was when she outlined the eyes and mouth on a pencil drawing of a woman I'd done with pen, and when I wouldn't stop singing a song she liked in an overly exaggerated imitation of the singer while she was in her room enjoying listening to her tapes. After telling me to stop it! Several times, she finally was fuming and quietly said, "Bitch." I sanctimoniously told her that was uncalled for. She didn't apologize, and we huffed off on our separate ways for a bit. But we got along. I felt very protective of her growing up. I was also unofficially appointed protector of her whenever Mom wasn't there. Mom was glad when my school switched over from a kindergarten to grade 6 school up to grade 8. Not because then I wouldn't have to do that mile-long walk to junior high like Brother did, but more so because I'd be able to look after Sister at the same school for a couple more years. I had to walk to school with her. I even had to schlep her along with me when I'd go over to my friends' houses, even though she was like 2 years old. I was in charge of keeping my sister safe, but I didn't always do the best job apparently, because there was that one time I had to be in charge of Sister having her bath when she was a little kid, and when I popped in to check on her in the bathroom, she was peacefully lying full out in the tub, with just her face sticking out from the water, which wasn't a problem, except she still had her hearing aids on. "Your hearing aids!" I gasped. Sister was good at reading lips. Her eyes became huge and she shot up from the water horrified. By some miracle they dried out and weren't damaged, but I got in trouble for that one. When I finally moved out in my late 20s, Sister moved out not long after. We'd shared that room for 17 years, and I guess it must have felt very strange indeed having that room all to herself after that. After we had both moved out to our own new homes, Mom and Dad did a small reno on that room, changed the doorway from rounded to a proper rectangular shape, and put a freaking door on it. Yes, that's right. Sister and I never had a damn door on our room. So yeah, if we were going to get changed, we either did it in the bathroom or we got changed as quickly as possible in our room, keeping an ear out for anybody about to walk by. As you can imagine, there were some drawbacks to not having a door, especially during the video game years. Mom was particularly obsessed with video games. Mostly she loved to watch us play, and she was into it. She did play a bit herself, but mostly she wanted to watch and give directions and smoke and smoke and smoke. Listen. You have to imagine a smoldering cigarette in nearly all memories of my young life. Mom and Brother loved to enjoy some late-night video games. Upstairs in our home was my and my sister's bedroom, then there was the open room that was my bedroom for a little bit, then my parents' bedroom for a bit, until it finally became the upstairs TV room. Then the upstairs bathroom was off from that, and the small bedroom that was my bedroom when I was really little, and then Brother's bedroom for years, until it eventually became the computer room / Dad's office. Mom and Dad's bedroom for years was on the main floor in a room just off the kitchen, which eventually became the dining room. I know, it's a bit confusing. Okay, but picture it being bedtime. Naturally, I was tired. Maybe I had to go to work if it was summer, or school the next day. Mom and 20-something-year-old brother want to play late-night video games. They say they'll be quiet. There is no door on our bedroom. I'm in the right corner of my room, and the light from the TV in the other room beams nicely into my corner. Brother and Mom always start out amicably, but that never lasts long. They're kind of talking quietly, and I can hear everything they say. Sister, without her hearing aids on her side of the room, is unbothered and can sleep through almost anything. Brother is usually the one playing video games as Mom watches with avid interest. Cigarette smoke is wafting into our room, and I absolutely hate that. I absolutely hate the cigarette smoke, but I super hate it even more when it's floating in my room as I'm trying to sleep. At some point, I wander out annoyed and ask when they're going to stop playing so I can get some sleep. They're both annoyed with me, and basically I'm told to just ignore it, and they're being quiet, so I should mind my own beeswax and stop being a complainer. Stomp back to bed. Mom is whisper talking to brother. Go in that room over there. I think we missed something in there. I did go in that room. No, you didn't. Yes, I did. I just went in there and we looked through everything. I still think there's something in there. Fine, I'll go back in there, but I was just in there. Finds gold coins or treasure map or important item for the game. Mom, see? All smug. I knew there was something in there, and you wouldn't have gone back if I hadn't told you. Eventually, as the hours pass by, and they become more and more tired, and the game becomes more stressful, more frustrating, and many cigs have been smoked, and maybe brother keeps dying and having to restart the game again, they become increasingly testy with one another and start to bicker. Eventually, brother became testy enough to say something really smart-mouthed and snarky. Mom, enraged, kicked at the air beside him. Brother, I can kick you a lot harder than you can kick me. Mom, oh yeah? Can you kick me as hard as Dad's going to kick you? Mom whirls downstairs all wound up. A moment or two later, Dad appears upstairs, bleary, still half asleep, and in his undershirt and underpants. Dad, what's all this about kicking your mother? Brother sputters out something like, well, she said she was going to kick me, and rants on about their video game war. Dad listens, nods thoughtfully, then wordlessly leaves and goes back to bed. So yeah, it would have been nice to have a door. After sister and I moved out, and that became our parents' bedroom, Mom would often lament how hot that room got. Hot? I frigging froze in that room. It was an older house, probably had drafty windows, etc., but that room was not warm in the winter. It occurred to me why, years later. Sister loved her stuffed animals and proudly lined them all up for display across the top of the radiator. We didn't have forced air heating, we had old-fashioned rads, so her stuffies would be there on top of the rad all the time, absorbing all that precious heat. Oh, and I suppose a door would have helped to keep that warmth in, too. If I think about sister as a kid, I picture the skinniest kid, straight platinum hair, with an impressive summer suntan, playing with her toys and practically living in that pink one-piece bathing suit all summer. She and brother could eat anything back then and never gain weight. She loved candy and nearly always came home crying after the dentist because she was going to have to get another filling. I called her Sugar Tooth, and eventually the nickname Nerd after some well-known candies, and because she just kind of was a lovable little nerd. During sister's puberty years, I tried to provide support I felt I never got from Mom. I told sister that if she ever needed to talk about anything, or if she had any questions about anything, she could come to me, or just ask, or talk about anything. She was horrified. She looked at me like she wanted to die that I was even asking her, and she shut the door on that convo as fast as possible. Thank you, but no thank you, weird alien who is comfortable talking about forbidden stuff in our family. The fun thing about having a little sister was that she would let me flex my aesthetic skills on her. It could be serious, like when I did her hair for her grade 8 grad or her prom, or when she was going out dancing at the club, but she would also let me do hilarious things like give her eyebrows. I mean, she always had eyebrows, but they were super blonde, so she never looked like she had eyebrows. So one time I took my mascara and brushed it over her brows. It looked totally hilarious and we died laughing. We thought it was so funny that we had to show Mom. To our annoyance, Mom didn't think it looked hilarious. She thought it actually looked good. She was all scrutinizing and serious and, yeah, I like it. She was so excited that sister had visible eyebrows, even though the black mascara made them look all nuts and bushy. But Mom was always a firm endorser of makeup, and she appreciated the enhanced look. I swear, to this day, anytime I go out without lipstick, I can still hear Mom in my head saying, I think you forgot your lipstick. I also did some fun Halloween makeup on Sister for various costumes over the years. That was enjoyable. I'm glad that Sister and I have always by and large gotten along. We were real partners when we had to clean out our family home after our parents died. As upsetting as that time was, we had a lot of laughs together then, oddly enough. I've always admired her innate cheerfulness, her determination, her optimism. That exuberant, cheerful Sister was always a nice contrast to my often dour, quiet nature in the past, I felt. Funny that someone who struggled with so much anxiety most of her life could also be so cheerful, and funny as hell, too.